As an avid reader of science fiction, I am obsessed with time travel. And in particular, I'm obsessed with the stories of time travel because of what they teach us about how time works and about how history works. Of course, the eternal question of every good time travel story is about what changes if you go back. There's the grandfather paradox, that is, if you go back and kill your grandfather, do you cease to exist? There's all sorts of different models of how time might work, as waves, as ripples, as lines. It's the sheer inconceivability of how time might actually be malleable that allows time travel to be such an interesting trope. But it's also because we see it happen in small ways all the time. That is, we look back at history and we change the story. We rewrite the past. The past is never really in the past. It's constantly being altered by the present, being recycled and reused in order to shape the future. And actually we see that happen everywhere. Not just in time travel stories, but even in the Torah. This week we see the beginning of the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy. And of course, Devarim is actually a speech given by Moses. It's a rhetorical device by which Moses is able to review his own life. It's a last will and testament before the people enter the land, and in a lot of ways it's an education, because the people whom Moses is speaking to at this moment, in the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, none of them have ever seen Egypt. They're not the generation who left Egypt. That generation died. That was the punishment for the incident of the spies, was that actually, although they were already at the border of the land of Israel, all the people who were there had to go out into the desert and wait. Wait until they died, so that their children could enter the promised land. And here we are, 38 years later. 38 years after those original people camped at Kadesh Barnea after the spies incident. And Moses is giving his grand speech, and he's teaching the children about their history, about what's happened on the journey, and of course he comes to the big incident which inspired so much of what became of the book of Numbers, which is the spies. In retelling the story of the spies, Moses is, let's say, liberal with his interpretation of what happened. Originally, when we read in the book of Numbers about the story of the spies, you may recall, 12 spies were sent into the land of Israel to survey the land. 12 came back after seeing it, said it was a land flowing with milk and honey, said it was a land which was bountiful and fruitful, but also that it was a land full of giants, full of armed cities and fortified walls. Of those 12 spies who returned, 10 said, listen, we can't do it. It's too much. There's no way we can ever possibly conquer it. And 2, Joshua and Caleb, said, no, we can do it. We have God on our side and we'll manage it. However, the 10, the majority, went out and told everyone else. They went out and inspired fear among the people. They said, oh, we're going to go into a land, we're going to be destroyed, our children are going to be carried off in front of our own eyes. Everyone panicked. A mass panic ensued, in which the people turned on Moses. They turned against him. They threatened him. God had to step in. And when God did, God wanted to destroy everyone. It's only Moses who stopped them. The compromise was that rather than destroy everyone right there at that moment, God would simply allow them to die in the desert alone. So the people who were already at the border of the land of Israel, 3 weeks after leaving Egypt, are sent not too far away to the middle of the Negev desert to spend the next 38 years. In that time, the entire generation died out, and a new generation, who were children when they left Egypt, or who were born in the desert, are now the ones standing in front of Moses. And when Moses tells them the story now, in the first chapter of Deuteronomy, he tells it differently. And in particular, in verse 25, when he's describing the key incident, Moses says, they took some of the fruit of the land with them and brought it down to us. And they gave us this report. It is a good land that the Lord our God is giving to us. Yet you refused to go up and flouted the command of the Lord your God. Talk about leaving out some key information. When Moses retells this story, he makes it seem as though the report was always good, as though the spies came back and said, yeah, it's fine, we can do it, but the people simply reacted negatively against that. The reality is different. 10 of those 12 spies inspired the people's fear. It wasn't just an automatic reaction. They were told by the people who had done the recon that actually it was not going to be a wise thing to do. Yet Moses is now able to change the story, partially because all the people who would have been there when the story actually happened, other than himself, Joshua, and Caleb, are dead. And so the past becomes slightly different. Moses wants a different narrative. He wants to try and tell a story to these people who are listening to him, who have been born in the desert, have grown up in the desert, have not known Egypt nor the Promised Land, and are about to be charged with entering it, conquering it, and engaging in hundreds of years of conquest to try and earn the Promised Land. And so, he changes the story. Now there's not 10 spies and 2 spies. Now all the spies said it was good. Everyone was on board. The people rebelled. It's a different narrative, and it matters that it's different, because what it shows us is that actually Moses is willing to be somewhat flexible with his understanding of the past. He understands that the past is used as a device to explain the present. And that means that when we discuss history, it's not always about what actually happened. It's about what the story is that we're telling. How do we understand our own history, our personal histories, our family histories, our community's history, and not facts, actually, because facts are ultimately unattainable if you weren't there, but stories, narratives. The ones that work, and the ones that don't. And the search for facts is often really quite foolish. Just like the people listening to Moses' speech, they weren't there, and the people who were there are gone. So rather than try and figure out exactly what happened, rather than go into the details of a very difficult moment, arguably the worst moment of the Torah for the people of Israel, Moses changes the story. And ultimately, I think that's okay. It's not quite time travel, but it is a form of time travel that we engage in nearly daily. When we take the past and we warp it slightly to help tell a different story of the present. We do that, Moses does that, and ultimately, that's probably all right. Shabbat Shalom.